Hi everyone, I'd like to welcome you to the 13th content webinar. We're almost at the end of the nanodegree. The last due date is on the 23rd of June, which is almost 2 weeks away. Now, 2 weeks might seem like a big amount of time, but in fact, it's not that much, especially for programming. Most of you have already completed projects which are due, and that's fantastic. Congratulations on that. Keep the work going. You're almost there. There's only a single project left until graduation, and you have ample time to get it done before the deadline. Now, I know that in the past I have said that these deadlines are soft. Well, this time around, though, that's not the case. This is the only deadline that you have to meet. Actually, you have to have completed all of the projects before this day, so before the 23rd of June, to ensure that you will graduate. If you have any projects lying around that are still not completed, it's best to finish them up as soon as you can, so as to be able to start work on the final project and ensure that you will graduate in time. The final project, as you may have noticed, is a lot harder than the previous ones. The level of difficulty is something like the memory game project, and you remember that was a bit daunting and difficult to complete. This one's, well, a bit similar, but it can be actually a bit harder because you have additional things like the service worker to construct on your own, which is not that easy. That's normal actually, because this is the final project. I mean, that's path to graduation, so it makes sense that it's the most difficult. Actually, this is the first app you're going to build. It shows a list of restaurants in different areas of New York. If you're a fan of New York or America like I am, it's going to be a bit fun to learn what kind of restaurants you can explore if you're over there. It's your job to make the layout nicely, so to structure the layout nicely, to make sure that there is a running service worker, like I mentioned, to cache all the site's assets, so all the site's files, and of course that Udacity have provided. Also, you have to make the site responsive, not to forget that. Speaking of API, actually, that's the topic of today's webinar. We will explore the API that you have to use in this project, the Mapbox API, to be specific. Getting started with APIs as beginners is not that easy, actually. It's kind of hard to understand what they actually are, how we make use of them. So thankfully, in this project, there is a minimum configuration needed regarding the API. So you'll only have to modify two things, actually, lines of code, to be finished with the. But we'll have a demonstration. So I'll provide a demo how to use the Mapbox API and render a map on your future projects. Of course, I've made a presentation for reference as I'm explaining to you, which I'm going to share after the webinar. Also, there's a list of links at the end of the presentation with additional information about the topics if you want to delve into more details. So I think we should get going. Yeah. Let me share the screen with you. There we go. This is our agenda. First off, we'll start with explaining what Mapbox is. it's good to have some background knowledge on the company that actually powers the API, who they are, what they do, those types of things. After that, we'll explain what an API actually is. APIs have become an indispensable part of the web nowadays, and it's crucial that you get an understanding of what they are and how they're used. If you plan on working professionally as a web developer, or any kind of developer for that matter, it's essential that you understand how to interact with and even build your own APIs. Um, in If you're a bit more experienced and skillful developer, you can write an API for your own use, and having that kind of skill will really boost your desirability as an employee. So it's good to know about APIs, how they're structured, how they're built. Bear in mind, it's not easy to construct an API. Research this topic before you can build your own API. After we discuss this, we'll take a look at the tools that Mapbox has to offer. As you will see, Mapbox provides a wide array of services that are useful across a whole spectrum of different industries. After we discuss that, we'll move on to the API that you'll actually be using to display the maps in your project. Like I said, you'll only get a distant taste of what it's like to work with an API during this project. And that's why I encourage you to get as much practice as possible with APIs, because, like I said, if you plan on working professionally, you will have to work with numerous APIs on your projects. And of course, after the presentation, if we have enough time, I will do some kind of demo actually on how to get started with Mapbox APIs, just how that's done. And of course, I'll share with you the project files so you can examine the code more closely. Finally, I've assembled a list of resources for you to get further knowledge on these topics. There's plenty of information online about APIs, about Mapbox, so a simple Google search should be enough to, to get you up to speed with these topics. And that's actually the agenda, so let's get started with the first topic. Let's see what Mapbox is all about. Here's a very shallow explanation of what Mapbox is. As you can see, it's a live location platform. Well, that does not bring much clarity to the table. In more simple terms, it's a company that offers location services for websites and applications. So if you're designing a website for a company of any kind, actually, most probably, they'll want to have their address listed on it. This is a perfect place to put some kind of map to make it easier for a user to find the location to find the exact location of the company. This is where Mapbox comes in. It has numerous servers that have data about all sorts of locations, and all that data is available to you for use through their API. So you might be thinking, what about Google Maps or Apple Maps? Isn't this exactly what they're also used for? And yes, actually, it is. In fact, these three companies, or these three, I don't know, services, are the main competitors in the software location industry. It's up to you to choose which one you want to use. And in the final project, it is explicitly stated that you can use Google Maps if you want to. Just bear in mind that there is no best choice. All three of the As you can see from this figure here, Mapbox holds its own in the race with Google and Apple, which is a formidable achievement. I mean, not many companies can go head to head with Google and Apple's products and actually hold their own. So more than 1.2 million developers worldwide use Mapbox services in some kind of way. Um, and that, of course, means that the amount of users that consume the work of 1.2 million developers is going to be a lot. And use a map that is powered by Mapbox. I've put all these figures here just to show you that Mapbox is not some kind of niche company with a shadowy product. Actually, Mapbox holds its own and provides a good service for developers. This slide contains information about the different industries that make use of Mapbox. I have only listed 6 of the biggest industries. There are many more. You can see all that information on Mapbox's home site. So as you can see, Mapbox successfully adapts to the need of industries like real estate, business analytics, travel, and even the government makes use of its services. So the app that you have to build falls in the travel sector because we're talking about restaurants and where to find them. So that's normally something you do when you're traveling abroad. Um, Here's a list of the biggest customers that Mapbox has. You're probably familiar with most of them. You have CNN, Snapchat, IBM, National Geographic, and even GitHub. So it's always nice to know that some powerful commercial giants are part of the community that is using your product, is using the product that you plan on using for your own projects. As you may remember, I mentioned a few webinars ago that every time you consider a new technology or some kind of tool to use in your project, it's best that you check whether it has a big user community, because that way you can find information about bugs and features only if you have a massive community behind the product that you're planning to use. It will be very easy to get started and equally as easy to find solutions to any problems that you might encounter while you're using the product. This is exactly the case with Mapbox. You can simply go online and find tutorials, bug fixes at numerous locations, so it will make a lot more faster and pretty easy as well. So now that we know what that will sorry, now that we know that we make use of Mapbox through its API, let's have a look at what it is. An API is code that allows two separate pieces of software to communicate with each other. So imagine that you have built an app for making a list of things to do. You know, that's a pretty popular task that teachers want people who are trying to learn web development to build. You have numerous online learning platforms that encourage you to try and build a to-do list. So it's nothing basically a to-do app. I'm sure you've seen many of these apps for mobile. This app is simple enough. You have some basic functionality like creating a task, removing a task, editing a task, and probably getting all the tasks that you have to do. These tasks need to have somewhere to live. So this is where the server comes in. we will store on and get our tasks from the server. If we have a server and we have our app, we have to have some kind of mediator, some kind of middleware that connects the two pieces. For our app to communicate with a server, we need an API. The API is what the app that you have built will use to connect to the server and do what you want with the tasks that you have created. You can think of it like this. The API is part of the gatekeeper to grant you access and give you the requested data. So that's essentially what an API is. Here's a more graphic example of what I mean. Notice how we have our app right here in the center. And that app receives different data from 3 separate sources, here, here, and here. These sources are the servers. Notice the blue drawings here. These are the servers. This is the database here, here, and here. They are highlighted in blue, as you can see, and notice how the green figures right here represent some kind of data right here. When they communicate this data, it goes straight to the server and is stored there. Finally, we have the red parts of the diagram, so the sources that lead directly to our app. These are in fact the APIs. The APIs receive the requested data from the database on the server and pass it on to our app. And that's actually it. That's all an API is supposed to do. It is the link between your application and the server you're trying to communicate with. Well, you might be thinking, how is this actually implemented in terms of code? Well, every single API has a documentation. This documentation is essentially the exact same thing to your readme.md files. The same way that you provide instructions about your projects and how to run them, what they exist, how they're built, that's essentially what a documentation is. Every single API has documentation. This documentation consists of the rules that you must follow to establish the connection between your app and the server. Essentially, the APIs provide us with functions, so normal JavaScript functions, that we can call to make some kind of request to the server to do something with data. We use HTTP protocols with these functions, so it's best to know the basic types of HTTP protocol requests. Sometimes we may have to specify some additional configuration to our request to better express exactly what piece of information we want to receive or exactly what we want to do with the data that we get. Like I said, every API has its own documentation which you have to go through in order to understand how you're going to communicate with the server. In recent years, there has been an increased effort to standardize the way APIs are constructed. This is done so as to minimize the time expenditure that developers have to spend on understanding how a specific API works. Maybe in the future, communicating with APIs will be fully standardized, standardized, which will allow us to approach this part of software development in a much more relaxed way. I've put a bit of text here, so let's read through it. API defines the correct way for a developer to write a program that requests services from an operating system or other application. APIs are implemented by function calls composed of verbs and nouns. The required syntax is described in the documentation of the application being called. And essentially we talked about all of this. So let's move on to the next slide. Here are the three basic types of APIs: local APIs, web APIs, and program APIs. This is a bit of a technical part which you're not it's not absolutely necessary to know all this, but let's go through it just so we have this knowledge. External APIs, as they're called, are published internally for use by the company's developers to improve its own products and services. Private APIs are not exposed to third parties. Like I said, private APIs are something that you can do yourself. They're not usable by no one else besides you. They're just functions that are widely used across your project, and you can simply write them once and export them so you can use them in different locations of your application. That's what a private API is. Public APIs, or open APIs as they're also known, are published publicly and can be used by any third party. There are no restrictions on these APIs. That's exactly what Mapbox is. It's a public API. Any third party, so us, can use it without any restrictions. Partner APIs can only be used by specific parties with whom the company agrees to share data. Partner APIs are used within business relationships, often to integrate software between partnering companies. So this is more of a commercial API, which the two companies or more actually agree upon a certain set of terms, and the company that's built the partner API bestows the other companies with this API so they can use it. So APIs may be further classified as local, web, or program APIs. Local APIs are the original form from which the name came. They offer operating system or middleware services to application programs. Microsoft's .NET APIs, the TAPI, so the telephony API, for voice applications, and database access APIs are examples of the local API form. So if you want to know more about local APIs, you can check out Microsoft's .NET API, the telephony API, and the database access APIs. Web APIs are designed to represent widely used resources like HTML pages and are accessed using a simple HTTP protocol. Any web URL activates a web API. Web APIs are often called REST APIs. REST stands for Representational State Transfer. Also, these web APIs are called RESTful because the publishers of REST interfaces don't have any data internally don't save actually any data internally between requests. As such, requests for many users can be intermingled as they would be on the internet. So program APIs, the final division of APIs, are based on remote procedure call, RPC technology that makes a remote program component appear to be local to the rest of the software. Service-oriented architecture APIs, such as Microsoft's WS series of APIs, are program APIs. So if you're interested more in learning about program APIs, you can check them out. So these three are the types of APIs that exists. For now, we'll only care about the web APIs. The others are a bit complex, and we don't really have enough time to study them right now. Moving on, you should know that almost every big digitized company has its own API. Here are some of the biggest companies out there that have their own APIs. You can embed YouTube videos in your apps by using YouTube's API. You can load account details or browse through a small version of both Twitter and Facebook using their APIs. And of course, as I'm sure you've already seen, you can place a map on your website using Google Maps' API. That's something that you can do with Mapbox as well, and so there's more than one way to skin a cat, as I'm sure you've heard. Like I said, pretty much every big company has an API built into their servers, and most of the time it's free, so you can unleash your creative ideas and make them work using various APIs. So enough about APIs in general. Let's see what Mapbox has to offer us. Mapbox has a range of tools that help us design the user experience we're trying to create. These are the main tools at our disposal. Obviously, we have the maps, which allow us to place a smooth, real-time map on our website or our web app. We have navigation, which is Mapbox's algorithm for finding the way to your desired destination. This is essentially navigation in the smallest amount of time or distance, depending on the user's preference. Atlas allows you to create your own space and provide navigation for it. This could be your own home, so if you had a large house, you could need navigation or some kind of location tracking to find your way around it. So if you're the owner of a factory, for example, you could make an on-premise navigation service for workers to find their way around easily. So this is kind of like a 3D model of some kind of building that's not included in the street. So there's no way for Mapbox to find and navigate you through it. So you have to do this on your own. Bear in mind that this is extremely difficult, so you will need some skilled developers to make this happen. But there's plenty of them around, and I'm sure you'll become one of them soon enough. So the Atlas service or the Atlas tool helps you create navigation and location services for your own premise, so your own location. The search tool allows you to search for an address and get the exact coordinates of the place and get the exact route that you need to take to get there. And finally, the Studio service or the Studio tool allows you to design your personal map that looks nothing like users have ever seen. This feature is what sets Mapbox apart from Google Maps and Apple Maps. The other two don't really have as much customization as available to them. You can customize in Mapbox, you can customize anything from the way how streets look to the landmark icons, the fonts, so pretty much everything. And these six, or actually five, are the tools that are available to us when using Mapbox. So as you can see, Mapbox is divided into four APIs. These are the maps, the navigation, the search, and the accounts API. We use the Maps API to actually display a map on the page. We use the Navigation API to provide users with the option to receive a route from where they are to their point of interest. The Search API provides customers with the ability to search for locations within our app and get the adequate search results that they want. So and finally, the Accounts API allows us to browse Mapbox's user database and search for a particular user or set of users. I don't really know why anyone would ever use this service, but it's there if you ever need it. So you can browse the accounts, you can perform a search for some kind of location, you can get navigation, and you can see the map. That's essentially what Mapbox has to offer you, and that's not all that different from what Google Maps and Apple Maps have to offer. As I'm sure you know by now, we're only concerned with the Maps API, and that's exactly what we are going to discuss right now. These are the three features listed on Mapbox's website when you go to the Maps API section. So I've extracted this simple graphic so as you can get a truthful description of what features the Maps API has to offer. Um, you can see that Mapbox use data from all kinds of sources from more than 130 places to get the most precise map. So their Maps API services over 5 billion requests per day, which is immense. I mean, there are 7 billion people in the world, and here we're talking about 5 billion requests per day. This is a lot. Also, here you see yet more famous companies that make use of Mapbox's API. Adobe, the weather company. So the list of famous companies continues growing. The feature I already mentioned to you, Mapbox has customization and cartographic design that is superior to those of Google and Apple's APIs. You can really get creative and design yourself a map that really fits in with the surrounding content instead of just being slapped awkwardly in the middle of the page. The last feature is a pretty cool one too. Maps can take a really long time to render because they have all three of the web development languages. So they have HTML, they have CSS, and they have JavaScript that needs to be requested and received by our app and parsed by the browser engine. So this is a whole lot of extra data, and it can kind of slow the process in our app. So it may need a bit more time to load up. So Mapbox has this feature which allows us to sense what kind of device you're trying to render the map on, and based on the device specifications, it picks an appropriate map for this specific device, so you don't have to download huge maps for smartphones or small maps for big desktop monitors. This is kind of cool because on Google Maps and Apple Maps, you kind of have to specify the exact size of the map, so you don't have this dynamic real-time map rendering. So That's a bonus point for Mapbox. Now, I prepared a small list of steps that you need to take when you decide to start working with the Maps API. Firstly, you need to create your personal profile on Mapbox. Once you've done that, you have to find your account dashboard. This is located in your account menu. So in the account dashboard, you should look for the Create a Token button. And once you find that, you have to go through the setup wizard to generate an access token. Um, this access token will be personal and unique, and you should be very careful where you share that. This token is what allows you to use Mapbox's APIs. So this is completely personal. No one knows about this, so you shouldn't be sharing it across website where you can get stolen. That's exactly what I'm about to do in the next few minutes, because you need to have some kind of demonstration on how to do these things. But you should guard your access token. So when you send a request over to their servers, if this token is recognized, you get the desired content. If not, Mapbox returns an error, and that's essentially it. There's no map. Once you have your access token generated, you can move on to the final step. Copy that access token and reference the appropriate documentation to see where exactly you should put it in order to start communicating with the API through this token. We'll see, like I said, we'll see an example in a minute. So this is the place, this is a snippet, a part of my account dashboard. You see the create a token button up here, and this is actually my access token. I created it a year ago, and I've kind of blurred it out so it doesn't get, stolen. But um, if you have to use it, use it. I'm okay with that. You have 10,000 requests per minute. I don't think that we can move above that. So use that if you really need to. Like I said in the beginning, I have prepared some resources for you if you wish to get some more information on these topics. The first link will take you straight to Mapbox's website if you're interested in learning more about them and their products. The second link points to Mapbox's documentation about the Maps API. This is actually the document you need to reference when you start developing the restaurant reviews app. It has all the information you need to start working with this API. The next link points to an article about APIs in general. Like I mentioned earlier, it's extremely important to know what APIs are and how to use them. This article is a good place to start. And the final link points to a step-by-step instruction on how to render your first map in your own app. So we'll go through that process in just a minute. And that's actually it for the presentation. Let's end it right here. We won't need that right now. Right. Now let's open up our code editors and try to, or first actually, let's see what exactly you need to do in your own files. So notice that I have the project open here. This is the starter code. And let's run that server so we can see what happens. You enter the command prompt and navigate to the appropriate place that you've put your project in. This oops, restaurant master, oops, not restaurant stage 1 master. So that's it. Here we have to run the command python-m http.server, and that's normally all you need to write, but right now I'm gonna run this code on port 8002 just so we don't have some files served to us from a service worker. Now the server is running. Let's open that up. Localhost 8002. And there we go. That's actually it. That's all you're gonna get before you put the appropriate Mapbox token. So here's my token. I'm gonna copy it and put it in main.js. Notice how we have the Mapbox token. This is the string. The guys at Udacity have conveniently put this text here. We just paste it, save the file, refresh the page, and we should see our app. And there it is. That's actually the app. Now that we have our token, Mapbox recognizes it and renders our app. So that's all you need to do to get the map on the page. Let's stop the server right now. We don't need it anymore. Like I said, this is very basic configuration and use of an API. So let's actually render our own app. For that, we need to follow a few basic steps. So of course we need to create our own index.html file. Everything begins with an HTML file. I have an extension here on VS Code, so if I write an exclamation mark and hit tab, I get the boilerplate code you're about to see right now. There it is. These are the very basic things an HTML document needs. Now I'm gonna create a div with an ID of map. This is going to hold our map on the page, and of course we need a script tag to hold our JavaScript file. So we'll create it in the same directory and we will call it map.js. There we go. And actually for now we can save our HTML file. So I'll save it on a desktop in a new folder called demo, and I'll call it index. Pretty popular name convention. So that's our HTML file taken care of. Now we have to grab some scripts off of Mapbox, because that's what's going to get the Mapbox library on our own project. And these two, notice we have the script with the actual Mapbox library. So we have Mapbox GL.js, that's the JavaScript version. And after that we have a link tag with a style sheet. That's essentially that's going to style our map appropriately on the page. So we need to include both of those in the head tag. There we go. And that's pretty much our HTML file done. Actually, let's generate a CSS file. Oops. Let's yeah. Now we will create the style CSS styles.css file in the same directory. close that tag. And now that's our CSS, that's our HTML file done. Let's move on to the JavaScript file. Oops, nope. Let's JavaScript. Yes, there we go. And now let's write the code that we will need to get the map on the page. So now that we've included the script from Mapbox's site, we have a variable called Mapbox GL, which we can reference, and it's an object actually, and it has a property called access token. And as you may know, this is the token that we generated and used to render the map on the restaurant project. That's what we will need again. Oops, I have not copied it right now. Copy it again. Copied, and there we go. Now we have our Mapbox token passed on appropriately. Now let's create a variable for our map. And again, we have to use the new to render an instance of a class. And now Mapbox GL, the variable, and it has a map function. We call this map function, and that's what gets our map rendered. But to render it appropriately, we have to pass in an object. Here in this object, we will specify the container, which is, as you may guess, the map, the div with an ID of map. Then we have to use the style property. Now this is something we have to create in Mapbox Studio. Notice the link here. This is the link to the Mapbox Studio. You click New Style and create whatever kind of map you want, and it will appear here. I have generated this style, and here in the 3 points menu, click that, and you will get the style URL. So it's an easy copy here, and you have to paste it here in a string. There we go. And the center, of course, has to be provided. So let's center it on Chicago. You know, I really like America, so let's use Chicago as our example here. 5,7. These are the latitude and longitude coordinates. If you don't know those, you can simply go online and Google the place that you want, and it will give you the latitude and longitude coordinates. So that's an array. It has 2 values, the latitude and longitude. And finally, the zoom. We should zoom that so it looks good. There's no right value for that. You just have to experiment. And that's our JavaScript file done, actually. Let's save it. Call it map.js. And actually, all that's left to do now is the CSS file. Specify the type of file, CSS. And here we will just really quickly provide the resets so we don't get any unneeded margins or paddings which make our content look funny. Margin 0, padding, of course, 0, and the box sizing property will be set to border box. There we go. And now some basic styling of the map ID. It has its position set to absolute. Here we go. Top 0, bottom 0, and width 100%. So that should give us a nicely looking map on the page. Now, fingers crossed that we have accomplished this. Let's run the index.html file. And there we go, actually. There is Chicago right there. You can drag around, see what kind of locations there are. This map is, I think, pretty good looking, but you can also customize it on your own. So let's actually change the location. Remember, all you need to do is go to this center array here and provide some different values. If we set it to 24.74, 2168, and change the longitude to 42.13, 6097. Let's see what that will produce. So we refresh, and actually we get our mine hometown. I live in Plovdiv in Bulgaria. This is probably very far away from where you're from, but this is my city, so I live somewhere over here. So yeah, that's where I'm broadcasting from now. And that's actually it. That's all I wanted to show you. Remove this screen share. So thank you for watching. I hope that you learned something new. Mapbox API is pretty cool. So any kind of API is pretty cool actually to use. So if you have any questions, you know where to find me. And I guess good luck with the projects. I'm always here if you need me. And I guess we'll see each other next week with actually what will be our final webinar. And that's it from me. So have a good weekend and stay productive. Goodbye.